Welcome to Customer Service Academy Radio with author and customer experience expert Tony Johnson. Tony will share his vision for successful customer service, leadership, and business excellence, and speak to some of the most impactful leaders in business today. And now, here's Tony Johnson.
Hello, everybody. Customer Service Academy is on the air. I'm Tony Johnson, your customer experience speaker, consultant, and trainer. And today's episode coming to you courtesy of Ignite Your Service Training and Consulting. Folks, I have the most amazing courses out there. You can head over to igniteyourservice.com/summits and check out the courses that will be coming to your area all across the U.S. We're going to be in Las Vegas. We're going to be in Lakeland, Tampa, and Orlando. Or head on over to thetonyjohnson.teachable.com to check out my online course, The Six Canons of Customer Service. Today we're welcoming Dan Thumberg onto the show. Dan is the founder of Swan Brewing here in Lakeland, Florida. He brings a unique background that spans the carnival and amusement park industries, beer distribution, and leading large customer service organizations such as American Express and Apple. Dan combines enterprise-level service systems with small business hospitality to build a community-centered experience. Dan, it's so great to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me today.
It's going to be fantastic. So, let's go ahead and just jump right in. We asked the same question to everybody, and I'm so excited because this is an operator-driven show. We have folks from food service, from food and beverage, from leisure, travel, accounting. We have all kinds, but we do have a huge basis in the hospitality industry here, and particularly in the restaurant business. And so what does a great customer experience or great hospitality mean to you as someone who does it every single day here in the community?
Yeah, so this is it's a little bit more nuanced of a question, Tony, because it used to be that great customer service was a smile, a handshake, a thank you for coming in, and we've definitely seen that evolution, over the last couple of decades. But really, post COVID, you've had kind of this just structural shift in expectations for hospitality. And so now what we're looking at is we have to be able to design the experience so the guests feel not only comfortable and confident, but your service needs to be intentional. It can't be accidental. It has to be ingrained in all of your processes. You have to be able to remove friction whenever possible. And the trust that you build by doing so is what ultimately is going to bring your customers back. And if you want to just put that all into one little blurb, the great service is designed. It can't be accidental.
And I hear that design thinking coming from a background. You worked with some big hitters back in the day, and that design thinking seems to have really stuck with you as you've continued through your journey of hospitality, customer service, and business ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, I do come from a little bit of a technical background, but when you look at American Express and Apple, for example, that I really, really got an education in what it truly means to be able to provide customer service. Um, More so in that the products that those two companies offer tend to be a lot higher tier. Not so much more with American Express because they loosened a lot of the restrictions. But back in the day when I was working for them, you really had to be, somebody special, and that's what it represented. It was more of a luxury product. It was a status symbol if you had an American Express card in your wallet. You weren't getting one if you had a credit score less than 740 or whatever it was, and the different colors, kind of dictated how, your status. And so, those customers really needed a lot of handholding to understand the benefits that they were getting, because they were also not cheap credit cards. When you look back in the day, the platinum card, we used to kind of balk at the $500 a year for the cost of a platinum card. And I think that is now well exceeded, $600-700 a year for the platinum card. And so that really, really takes a lot of effort to show people, the reason that they're spending that. What are they getting out of it? And the customer service component of it was really what was the defining factor for any of the Amex products. You knew that if you had any issue whatsoever, you were calling that number on the back of your card. You were getting a human being. You weren't getting put into an IVR that was going to sit there and reroute you through a call handler, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You called, human picked up the phone, recognized you by name, and knew basically what all was going on with you, and that one call resolution could happen because that customer service agent was empowered to go ahead and take action on so many different things. There was no escalation to a tier two unless it was some crazy issue that the customer was having. Apple, the same thing. Apple has always been looked at, I've got my phone right here, as a higher end product, right? And it was with everything. It was with the design, it was the functionality, it was the way that the systems all kind of worked together. The product itself became the customer experience. But you add the customer experience from the store to the online sales to the online service or what have you. The entire Apple ecosystem became the customer service component because the systems all work together mostly flawlessly. But when you did have an issue with it, it was the same exact thing. It was a one call resolution. You weren't getting passed to this person, to this person, to this person. You had your issue taken care of in just a couple of minutes, unless it was something just absolutely crazy.
And I do love, Dan, that you bring up that idea of first call or first issue resolution. It's so huge from that simplicity piece. And if you're not measuring that, whatever resolving the issue is on the first go around with a customer or a guest or a consumer, if you're not measuring that, that is one of the main scores that really matters out there in today's market. So, Dan, I'm glad you brought that up. But as we kind of fast forward, can you tell us your story though? Because to move from what you just spoke about to very high-end brands, and by the way, I'm a card-carrying American Express member, and to me, it still feels very special. It may not be on the continuum of value to luxury. It may not be in the luxury bucket anymore, but I still put it in the elevated or premium space. I still feel proud. When I was a kid, if you'd have told me I was going to have an American Express card someday, I'd have thought, wow, oh my gosh, how important am I going to be? Because that was just a big deal when I was growing up to have that. But to have moved forward, on your journey and now where you're at, can you tell us a little bit how you ended up starting Swan Brewery, how you made that journey and kind of where you are now?
Oh man, I mean, obviously my bio is completely disjointed, and if you were to hand that to anyone, they'd say, how did you get from point A to point B? And the long and short of it, I was born and raised in the carnival and amusement industry. Actually, was fourth generation in the business. My great grandfather was an engineer back in the day, and he actually helped design a lot of the carnival systems that we know from like the 1940s, the 1950s. Well, that evolved. My grandfather took over operations. My father took over operations. I got kind of thrown into it from a child. So I grew up in that industry, traveling around, from city to city over the summer, and then having basically a regular school life. We would come back and we I went to regular public schools, and we would just fly out and go do the carnival thing, the traveling part of it during the summer. My father realized, as I got a little bit older, started to get, into my early teenage years, that probably wasn't a great idea to keep bouncing around like that. So we decided to get into the amusement park business. And over the years, we had a couple of small amusement parks: Tampa, Virginia Beach, Daytona Beach, where we were essentially doing the same exact thing. We just didn't have to move every single week. A lot easier, on the family life. Unfortunately, father and grandfather passed away, when I was 20, 22 years old. And so I was kind of like left in this ocean of what do I do now? I was swimming and I was able to keep my head above water, but I really didn't have any direction anymore. I was driven by the desire to continue the family business, but without the family there to help me continue to drive it, I kind of lost it. And so I looked at alternatives. I had started my college career, and I didn't know that I wanted to continue to do what I was doing. I thought I was going to be the world's greatest mechanical engineer. And to be an engineer, you really have to have a great support system to push you through. And at the time, I just didn't have that support system. So I started looking around to see what was interesting, what I could do next, and Pepin Distributing in Tampa had an opening, and I knew someone in the organization, and so I just reached out to them and said, "Hey, what is this all about? Is this something that is interesting, something that I could learn from?" And I ultimately ended up joining them and really just started kind of at the bottom. I was merchandising grocery stores, then I got my own routes. I was doing route sales and distribution. Ended up learning a lot about the sales aspect of the beer world. Not so much the making of it. That came when I bought my first Mr. Beer kit, I think in 2001, and made really, really, really horrible beer in plastic bottles. Anyway, so I ended up doing that for about 5 years, and it was great. I realized that there was probably something more that I could do, and this was right before the '08 recession. And any of your audience members who 100% remember the '08 recession realize how much of an absolute disaster it was. And so I decided that that was a good time for me to go ahead and reinvent myself once again. I decided to take all the skills that I had learned over the years, threw them into a CV, and said, okay, let's figure out where I fit. At the time, I had moved up to Ohio to help my mom out because she was she wasn't doing so great either in '08, and somebody had to at least be able to keep their house. And so I moved up there to help her out and went to the the ODJFS is what it's called. They kind of help place people into different positions, depending on your skill set. And there were some opportunities to go and kind of get entry level at American Express, and that's kind of what I did. I moved up pretty quick in American Express. Ended up getting headhunted for Apple. Moved over to the Apple program, and then I was asked to move back to Florida to move out of the great cold of Ohio down to Florida. And we started a new operation just outside of Fort Lauderdale with about 450 FTE, handling tier one, tier two iOS, a little bit of Mac OS as well. But that's really where I started to kind of shape my understanding of what does, management is this construct that we've created, and for better or for worse, it works. But most people treat management as I am the big boss. I'm going to tell you what to do. Listen to me. I am the end all be all. But that's not how I was taught, and that's not what I learned when I went to work for Amex and Apple. That management wasn't just solely here's what I say, do it. If not, there are going to be consequences. There really were three main components that we learned: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. You have to be able to give people the tools necessary to be able to succeed. And then you have to give them even more tools to get good at what they're doing. And then they have to also understand that what they're doing means something, and it means something more than probably what they're seeing on the surface. And so that's kind of my overall background. Now, the Apple thing worked out great, but I wanted to get married, and my fiance at the time was getting transferred out of South Florida back to Orlando, and she had a house here in Lakeland that she was going to move back into, and said, "Hey, are you going to come with me?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so that's how I made the transition out of Apple and got to Lakeland. I had no idea what I was going to do, and we happened to be down at our little farmers market on Saturdays, and noticed nobody was selling any supplies to make beer, and I was kind of getting itchy. And I went to the market manager and asked, and they approved a beer making tent for Saturdays. And I did that for a little while under the Swan Brewing label, and that's actually how Swan Brewing got started. Was a little 10 by 10 market tent, and it evolved. I ended up meeting my business partners actually at the market. They were customers, and we worked out a business plan and really started to put the wheels in motion. Now it took a while. It was not overnight. I think we initially set plans to the city in May of 2016. We finally got open April 2018.
Well, and you are a community staple here, and that's a great journey and so much learning along the way from very consumer, customer, and guest centric organizations to fuel along the way. So those were, if nothing else, great pieces of education along the way as well. I'm sure. I'm sure you picked up so many nuggets from that, and I'm sure Steve Jobs would appreciate after him starting his business in a garage, you starting yours in a 10 by 10 tent. A lot of corollaries there that I bet he would chuckle for. But yeah, just great stuff there. Great journey. So, but as you've built your business, as you brought people in to help with your business, as you brought on employees and that kind of stuff, how have you kept customer service strong and kept it a focus and brought people on that have that spirit and trained them in all the things to create that community and environment? Because your place is a gathering place. Swan Brewery is a gathering place here in the community. How have you managed to keep customer service strong as you built your team?
You have to hire for it at the very beginning. And I say this to every single person who walks in the door looking for a job: is I can't train you to be a nice person. I can train you for any of the skills that you're going to need to be successful in this operation. But the one thing that I cannot train for is your personality, your ability to empathize with people, and not sympathize, empathize with people. Um, then once you find that candidate, which was and continues to be a struggle. I know the last round of hiring, I needed to hire one person. I believe I had 140 candidates apply. I actually we ended up not hiring any of them. And we had a candidate who had been in the business for about a decade, who was looking for some new opportunities, and we kind of just lucked into that candidate. But that's kind of how it's been. You really have to be able to kind of go through a lot of just people that don't have that small little skill set that you can't train to. But once you have them, then you need to be able to continue to nurture that aspect. And so what we do, again, we train to three things. The three things that I learned at Apple, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. It's the whole Simon Sinek, Daniel Pink, kind of way of thinking. But it really is. We go in and we train them to be able to identify issues and to be able to solve problems right from the very beginning. We empower them to take the moves. And I think the way that I put it to everyone is, as long as the decisions you make are not detrimental fiscally to the business, then I will support your decision. Um, Again, mastery is a part of that, though. They have to be able to know what they're doing, what the ramifications of changing any of those operations are, and then be able to put that into practice. And then also understand we're not just a place that serves beer. We curate relationships. We are one of the only places that you can still go and everybody has their phone down. Nobody's looking at their phone, doom scrolling through Reddit or whatever the case may be. They're sitting there actually engaging in conversation. And that is what it's all about. It's not about the beer, it's not about anything else. It's about continually curating the relationships and allowing people to have that experience, because it doesn't exist a whole lot anymore. What we've noticed, though, is again the shifting customer preferences. And we've had to change even in the last, going on 8 years now. I know when we opened, it was a lot more about the product. You had a lot of people that were just absolutely crazy about the different beer styles. It was right when the New England style IPAs were coming around, and everybody wanted to have these adjunct filled stouts. And, it was we were almost chasing that route to make sure that we were staying relevant. And but one thing we never did was we never lost the sense of community, what our community was actually calling for. We did almost make a mistake and go after the very, very small beer crowd that was looking for the hype, you know. But 95% of what we were doing was still focusing on what our community was actually demanding. And then so that was the early stage, but now the focus is a lot more on the customer experience. The beer it sells itself. We won all the medals. We've won all the accolades for our product. The product is cemented. Now it's focusing on continuing to have the experience for the customer.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. A lot of people don't know what business they're in, right? And
Mhm.
you recognizing that you are in the community business, you're in the relationship building business, you're a true third place where people can come together. And it's the same thing. Starbucks came to that realization of 25 years ago about the coffee space. This is the same thing that you're doing here, which I think is just outstanding to know that it is. There's something special about being a place where people gather. And the fact that your product is solid and is award winning and is amazing, and now you've got the wraparound experience to go with it. That's an unbeatable combination when you think about that, about all the things that touch your guests while they're in your dirt.
Absolutely. And listen, we are humbled every single day by the outpouring of support that we continue to get. Like I said, Tony, it's been 8 years. We all know the life cycle of a business. At 8 years, the majority of them, are already out of the maintenance phase and they're starting to see a decline. But if they haven't, then you become a staple of the community. Then you become an institution. And that was always the question. Which way are we going to go? Are we going to be able to be proactive enough to ensure that we become the institution, or are we going to be one of these fading trends? Like, unfortunately, a huge chunk of the craft beer market is going through right now. Not that they were fly by nights, but they just didn't have the understanding of what it meant to have continuity.
And I think, Dan, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but for me, I see you out in the community in a lot of places, right? You show up at events, you show up to, we've been at a dozen ribbon cuttings together in the in the last 4 months, active in the Chamber of Commerce and on the board. That has to have a positive impact because people not just don't just see you as a business. You're out and you're a part of the community. That has to play into it, and that has to be something that other folks out there can learn from too.
Yeah, your business can't be faceless. You absolutely have to have at least one person who is out in the community and is, the face of whatever it is. I try to be as active as possible. I've slowed down a little bit from where I used to be. It seemed like my job was more being the face out in the community than actually running the operations at one point. But now it is nice to be able to, understand where it's important for you to be out there. Who needs to see you to continue the relevancy. But beyond that, it's also important to keep touch with what's going on in your community, to really understand. And it's almost like being a politician in that. In that sense, you have to have the pulse of the community. You have to know what your constituents want, but you also have to understand and identify where your city, where your community is going. Where is going to be, the next evolution of Lakeland. What are people clamoring for? What are the new ideas that are popping up? And are there things that maybe you see that you could do to kind of make your operation better? And I think the only way that you do that is to kind of stop looking internally and start looking in the periphery, look a little externally, get out there and, shake some hands, go to some events and understand what is going on around you, because it's so easy, as a business owner, to just become internalized and always think that what you're doing is the absolute best. You don't need advice from anyone. I always like to think that I am the dumbest person in the room and I have something to learn from every single contact. And I take that away. Every single conversation that I have, I'm always listening for a couple of keynotes for things that I didn't know or things that I wasn't thinking about. And I take it to heart, and then I try to take action on as many things as possible.
You mentioned it a little bit earlier, right? Around watching the shifting customer, consumer, guest preferences. What are you seeing out there in your business? Maybe not specifically around the beer piece, but maybe around preferences around hospitality and service. Are you seeing any indicators that as the younger generations are coming of age, or as you're getting a different demographic coming in, or just as time changes and people evolve, are you seeing any indicators of shifting preferences either in product or hospitality or how people like to be served? Anything coming up, Dan?
Absolutely. I can tell you right now, the experience matters more than the product. When we are currently in a situation where the disposable income for the majority of Americans has diminished over the last 10, 20 years. And so you have to be respectful of the disposable income. And being respectful understands that that component is not just about the product that they're going to get. They're willing to spend more for a product, and they're willing to come and spend more money at your business or come more frequently if they can kind of tie that to the experience that they expect. Customers, they have almost no patience for confusion or friction right now. And so the impetus is on us to be able to eliminate that or minimize that as much as possible. Breweries always have been, if you look from a European perspective, a community space. You go and you look at all the European beer gardens. There's a reason that they're just long rows of tables with benches. It's for people in the community to gather together, maybe sit next to somebody that you've never known and strike up a conversation, or to have mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle all sit together and be able to share stories over a pint or two, maybe listen to some music. That has been that way for the longest time. In America, we really started to jump on that in the craft beer boom of kind of the mid to late 2000s. But there were a lot of craft breweries that didn't kind of take that to heart and really understand the reasons why we were doing that. Now more than ever, you really have to focus on the third space, as you said. That is what people are looking for. They're looking for authentic experiences in a third space. Experience now matters as much as the product at the end of the day.
And Dan, you had a couple of writer downers in there for the audience. The friction piece, the only way you will know, and it is what we call design thinking in the CX world, or journey mapping. Take a look at your organization, whatever it is, wherever you serve your guests, they call in, whether they go to a website, whether they're coming into a physical space. Look for those friction points, silly policies, stuff that's too hard, dumb things, and go sand off the rough edges and knock them out of your customer's way, because Dan's 100% right. They will bolt faster than ever to your competition if you make things too hard for them. And I think the other thing that I loved hearing is just understanding that the experience is such a key part. And if you haven't, I'm sure you have, but if you have not, audience and everybody listening out there, third places they're not work, they're not home, it's someplace else you can go. Starbucks sort of piloted the third place boom 20 years ago, or farther back, but now there are a lot of places, like for example Swan Brewing and Starbucks and local coffee shops like we have here in Lakeland, that all fulfill that third place type of space. So thank you for bringing that up. And then the kind of last formal question I've got for you before we go into the lightning round is, if you could give one piece of advice to companies out there when it comes to providing customer service or hospitality, what one piece of advice would you give folks in this current market?
I think you need to design service like a system and not a personality. That's simplistic, but it really is. We look at, all the SaaS right now. People want to be able to have something simple. They want to be able to have something that's reliable. If you start right from the very beginning and understand that customer service is going to be even more important than some of the hard skills that you're going to teach, then I think you're in a good track. But you absolutely have to design your customer service like a system.
I got friends that work over at Disney, and I've been through the Disney Institute. They were a big part of helping me design a lot of what we do. And I will tell you, they talk a lot about the systems, and the boring stuff is what makes the magic. And I
Yep.
always took that to heart from folks over there. Well, Dan, this has been fantastic so far. Really appreciate it. And folks, if you are loving this, and I'm sure you are right now, leave 5 stars, say something nice, go on down there and subscribe, share it with your friends. Help keep Customer Service Academy one of the top podcasts for customer experience and hospitality. And thanks so much to FeedSpot to continue featuring us as one of their top customer service and top customer experience podcasts. But again, this has been great so far, Dan. But are you ready for the lightning round?
Hey,
5 quick questions, 5 quick thoughts to get to know you just a little bit better as a person. What's your favorite hobby?
give me anything to do in the kitchen. Right now, I love my smokers, and I have gotten into baking sourdough because I love fermentation.
You're 5 years too late for the sourdough bandwagon, Dan, but I'll eat it just the same. I've got a smoker on my back lanai that I love more than anything. So yeah, I feel you on that. What brand out there or company do you think gives great customer service right now? And if there's a local brand, would love to hear it. But who gets it right for you?
You, this is a tough one. I do want to keep this local, but I do have to give a shout out to Centennial Bank, and explicitly our local Centennial Bank location right here on South Florida Avenue. You talk about eliminating or minimizing friction is one of the best experiences that I've had in town. I want to say that it's a restaurant or it's something else in our community, but I have to deal with them several times a week, and every single time that I go in there, it doesn't matter what happens. There is zero friction. I'm in and out. They know exactly what I need. There's no, do you have your account number? Do you have this? No. I walk in, Dan, how are you? Boom, 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 in, out. I'm on with the rest of my day.
And I love that we are spoiled folks living in Central Florida, because there are a lot of hospitality rich organizations down here that are kind of locally grown. And I will tell you, the bank industry down here is strong. Mid Florida Credit Union is my bank, and they're wonderful. There's one right around the corner I go into. They know me by name. And of all places in Lakeland, Florida, the tax collector's office that does the DMV licensing stuff, the fellow who runs that, Mr. Tedder, is outstanding. They do a wonderful job. I never thought until I moved here I would put the DMV on my list of great customer service, but for me, they do a fabulous job in there.
I have to agree with you 100%. You know what? I am going to add a an option B for my answer there. Joe Tedder and his group at
Yep.
that DMV is phenomenal. My wife's got a whole story about contacting Joe Tedder about a question, and I think she was even blown away. But if you DMV is traditionally not
Right.
a wonderful place to go. And I think at the end of the day, and I know Joe's getting a little bit older and probably doesn't want to do anything else, but he should go and absolutely train DMVs across the country.
I agree. If you were looking for a cottage industry to start a business, right? I think you're 100% right. I don't know if DMV consulting is a thing, but he would be great at it. And then, how about your favorite food right now?
Give me a Cuban sandwich, black beans and rice, double crab, and a cafe con leche.
That
Grew
is
up in
very appropriate to this area because there is a Cuban sandwich on every corner in Lakeland. How about the most interesting job you've ever had?
well, I mean, I was the pixie dust spreader on the Tilt-A-Whirl. Had to give you a little National
I
Lampoon's
love
reference
that.
there and
And
kind
you
of
could
harken it back. Yeah,
legitimately say that. Not many people can actually say that, but growing up in the amusement park business, you can actually say that.
100%.
And are you watching or binge watching anything fun right now? And it's okay if it's an oldie but a goodie, but what are you binge watching right now?
My guilty pleasure is Fallout. I've been a huge fan of the video game series for years, and when I saw that Amazon was coming out with a show, I had high hopes for it, but I was hesitant to believe that it was going to be. But but the way that they keep things as video game accurate as possible is phenomenal. I don't know that anyone else has nailed it like they have.
And it's funny you mentioned that because that was also my brother-in-law and I go to Halloween Horror Nights every year over at Universal Orlando, and the Fallout House did a wonderful job as one of the best pieces of IP utilization in a long time. So it's funny, the series was true to the video game, and the haunted house was true to the series, and so it was just really good IP utilization. They got their money's worth out of that in 2025, I can tell you that.
I think I
So
think I, th- I think it all goes back to they kept the designer Todd Howard in the loop and everything, and he was the one making the majority of the executive decisions. And I think that that's a huge component. When you have someone who understands the direction and the idea, let them go with it. Don't sit there and try to make it fancy for TV or make it appeal to whatever audience you think it's going to appeal to. Understand that if you have an IP that's as dynamic and as important as Fallout is, just let it go. Just let it do it. Let it get the customer base it's going to get, and understand that that's what it's going to be.
And I will tell you, I'm the biggest Star Wars nerd you've ever met, Dan, and not the hugest fan of the sequel trilogies they recently did. I'm a first six and Rogue One kind of guy. But what they did really well were some of the series that they had on Disney Plus,
Mhm.
because to your point, a fellow named Jon Favreau, who directed Elf, he was happy in the Avengers and the Marvel stuff. He was the showrunner, and he had a deep love for the Star Wars material and respected it and did an amazing job with it and was really good at fan service without going overboard. And so my family loves the stuff that's been on Disney Plus. Anything that Jon Favreau has his fingerprints on, I'm kind of a fan of anyway. And he kind of crushed it with his Star Wars stuff. So,
Agreed.
well, hey Dan, this has been great. I really appreciate being on the show. How can people get in touch? Let people know where your location is here in Lakeland. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. We're located right in beautiful downtown Lakeland, Florida, right on Lake Wire, 115 West Pine Street. Just do a Google search for Swan Brewing. You know how to use Google. If you want to come in and say hi, have a beer, let some of the staff know that you heard me on your podcast. I think it's the best way to reach out.
That's great. And I will put that information in the show notes. You're going to be down there leaving us 5 stars anyway. I'll put some links to the website, to Dan's profile on LinkedIn, and the address of the location. That way you can find it very easily. Throw it in your Google and head on over and have a cold one. And it will be a great experience, I promise you. But Dan, thank you so much again for being on the show today.
Absolutely, Tony. Thank you so much for having me.
So, folks, that is our show. Thanks again to Dan for being on today. And remember, we are still in the year of experiential hospitality. This is where strategy becomes experience through intentional design, people, and connection. that will truly be your competitive advantage in 2026 and beyond. And if you want to learn more, head on over and check out my book, Together We Serve, on Amazon.com. You can get it on paperback, digital, and audiobook. So head on over and check out that book and get your copy today. But until next time, I've been Tony Johnson, your customer experience strategist and trainer, reminding you to keep your customers at the center of everything you do, because that's where the most amazing things are possible. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will talk to you next week.
This has been Customer Service Academy Radio with Tony Johnson. Tony is available to speak at your event, meeting, or workshop. Have a powerful customer-focused day.